Hey, I'm Dr. DeBeer, and you should be watching the Savage Gentleman Show.
Savages, welcome to the show. I'm happy to have Dr. Brad DeBeer with us. He's the owner of Axon Integrative Health, the only chiropractic neurologist you can see in Colorado right now. We got a bunch of questions for him. We're going to get a bunch of knowledge. He works with a lot of athletes and a lot of fighters, so I think you guys can learn a lot today. We'll get going.
So throughout high school, I played lacrosse, and I guess in that aspect of things, kind of getting used to being in the gym setting. Once I went to undergrad, and I went to Florida State, so big strength and conditioning aspect and just presence around campus. So started weightlifting and powerlifting, and ended up hurting my back. I was squatting about 535 and down on my
one of these days.
Yeah, down on my third squat, coming back up, just tweaked something, collapsed, and had a pretty rough few days after that. But Cairo helped me back through, and from there I was like, I'd help some other people like this and kind of avoid surgeries and drugs and things like that. And then through school was, I guess, enlightening for neurological recovery and performance aspects of things. So figured I could help athletes more so training their brain than being another strength and conditioning coordinator or sports medicine doc or something like that. So figured I could integrate those aspects along with brain training and rehab. So
It seems like a painfully underdeveloped area. Like brain rehab, for how
Yeah.
important it is. It's just so rare to find and difficult to like track down the science, or just there's still like a stigmatism around it almost about concussions in sports. And we don't approach it like you would. If you tweak your back, you're gonna go deal with it.
Yeah.
You get a concussion, plenty of people are like, all right, I'll see how I feel in a week.
yeah,
I guess I'll go back and play the game next Saturday, you know?
exactly. And it's kind of that silent injury. So you can't see it. It's not a broken bone. It's not a physical injury, an ACL tear or something like that. So tend not to give it the proper amount of time, or I guess respect in the way that you should.
That was gonna be one of my questions. I know we've touched on this privately, but like how it's so difficult to diagnose concussions. What is your process for like, hey, whether or not you do have a concussion? And then one of the questions we had was, and this is I guess good for athletes, if you think you have a concussion, what's the basic protocol? What's the basic steps? So how would you kind of diagnose it? And if you think you might have one, what do you do?
Great questions. I guess to diagnose, it ends up being more of a clinical picture, and how you present, and certain metrics and possible eye movements and vestibular ocular motor screening and things like that. So paying attention to how your eyes move and coordinate with neck proprioception, blood flow regulation to the brain. Those are kind of more of the things that we want to look for. As much as we all think it's like this physical injury, it's really much more a metabolic disruption and this chemical process that sets off this not so nice chemical cascade in the brain that perpetuates your symptoms and causes all kinds of things that are tough to get rid of. So diagnosing a lot of people will try to say that you have MRIs and blood labs, but
Right.
those aren't really really diagnostic of what we're looking for. So I think we're on the 6th International Concussion Summit, and last one was in Amsterdam, and a lot of their diagnostic criteria, they even mentioned that some of these imaging tools just aren't as accurate in diagnosing. Even pre and post baseline scans are sometimes, they're more relative than anything absolute. So
Okay. Really tricky to diagnose.
For sure.
What would you say to an athlete if they think they might have one? What should they do?
Definitely get checked. The biggest thing in literature right now is delaying being checked by a professional, a concussion specialist, can lead to delayed symptoms. So we want to be able to get you in and assessed. 60% of these things do resolve in 2 weeks' time without any direct changes to what you're trying to do or therapeutic interventions. So you want to get seen, you want to see what you have and what kind of subclass of concussion we're looking at, and how to go about an active return to play protocols and things like that. So
What are the basic subclasses?
So
If any,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
if there even is a basic.
there's 5 to 7 that's in like current literature right now. So really the biggest ones are blood flow regulation and autonomic functions. We have hormonal dysregulations, emotional changes, and then cognition and psychological. So being able to distinguish between which one you have or which combination of flavors that you might have, because
For that term.
you're certainly not limited to one, right? Being able to diagnose multiple, and if there's neck involvements, cervicogenic, vision, vestibular play a big part into those as well. Those are all their own subcategories. So if you get punched in the head, you get a concussion, even a motor vehicle accident, you fall on the ski hill or something like that, you need about 25-30 pounds of pressure per square inch to cause a concussion. You need about 5 to cause whiplash. So
And those symptoms are super similar, right?
definitely, yep. And it's you got to make sure that you delineate and decide which one and how to treat and things like that. Usually they are together.
What is Axon Integrative Health?
So it's like a concept my wife and I started last year, and just trying to integrate all aspects of brain, body, and mind into how we treat and how we, push on performance for a lot of these athletes. So
If someone's coming to you for the first time, how does the process usually start? What is the reason that most athletes or fighters find their way to you and they're like, hey, this is something I need in my life?
a lot of the times it's either an injury or looking for performance, right?
Recovery and performance.
Yep. And I guess recovery on the note that we should be recovering in between, performance on all aspects of things, right? But rehab from any injuries, or like your knees are bugging you and not allowing you to do certain moves or get into certain positions is pretty tough. Head injuries, concussions.
Dr. Brad, could you tell us about how much pressure it takes to actually cause a concussion versus whiplash, and how important it is to come in and get checked if you think that's happening?
Yeah, so it takes about 25 pounds of pressure to create a concussion injury, and then 5 pounds of pressure to create whiplash injury. So if you have a concussion, you undoubtedly have that whiplash injury as well. Delineating, which cause is causing these symptoms and developing a plan as soon as possible is important for your recovery, and making sure we make it as short as possible.
It's perfect.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we had a great discussion over at Axon about some of those basics of health, your basic principles of health. Could you retouch on that and tell us more about it?
Yeah, so our 3 basic principles of care are that we're going to induce or encourage neuroplasticity to happen, these changes in the brain to allow adaptive plasticity and improvements to our nervous system throughout our lifetime. Looking for cellular health and improving energy in the cell, because that's really the main point of most health conditions, and then decreasing inflammation and allowing for a proper environment for those cells, those neurons to be healthy and promote what you want them to do.
So neuroplasticity, anti-inflammation, and cell health.
Yeah,
And those are the
3
fundamentals we can kind of almost always go back to for
yeah.
health and wellness.
Absolutely, and we can apply and change methods to see who we're trying to treat and who we're trying to focus that on, and it fits every aspect of what we're trying to do, from health and recovery to performance.
I think that's so cool, because as we've continued this journey in martial arts, you'll kind of learn that you just need to go back to the fundamentals, and the very basics are going to guide you into seeing that applied to every other aspect of life, even if it's health and wellness, if it's a higher level of schooling, whatever it is. Those basic fundamentals tend to be what matters. So it's really cool to see that you've boiled down those very basics, and whenever you need to, you can go back and be like, okay, which one of these do we need to apply the situation to? What do we need to work on? It's very cool to see how those parallels.
Yeah, absolutely, and it helps a lot of patients and athletes understand kind of what the purpose is and what we're trying to do, and it's super easy to digest.
One other one I remember us talking about, I had asked, like, what could you do to prevent concussions, I think? I remember we talked about, like, dehydration potentially being one of them, and there were some other ones. Do you remember that?
Neck
That
strength.
along those lines?
Yep, neck
Yeah,
strength,
what are the things you can do to try to prevent concussions? What are the controllable variables?
Yeah, so throughout literature we got 3 main things three main things to prevent concussions, more reduce risk, right? And neck strength is one of those, and that's probably the most foundational. It is your suspension system for your brain, right? If you can withstand a better, impact and absorption, then your brain sustains less of that impact. Peripheral vision, being able to see something incoming, an opponent, a tree out skiing or mountain biking, something like that. And then reaction speed, that third one's reaction speed. So being able to react to that incoming and brace and impact or change a body movement to, again, kind of absorb that impact a little better. Those are really the three biggest things. I like to think that cellular health and environment play a big part, dehydration, and making sure that we have proper nutrients and minerals to mount the proper responses we need in that time.
But those are the big ones: neck strength, peripheral vision, and reaction speed.
Yep.
That's gold for
If you
combat
have those
athletes.
down,
Yeah, those are the
gold.
three.
If you have those down, or they're very healthy, they're at a good level, they're performing well, the chances of you getting concussion go down.
Yeah. I mean, the likelihood of you actually
Seeing it,
sustaining
avoiding
an injury.
it, and-
Yep, exactly. You're able to throw a block up or move out of the way, and instead of moving into it or stopping your movement and taking a second and being blindsided. So
And I think those will be two of the really big ones that will be fighters' concerns, is both preventing concussions if possible, and then recovery. What are some of the things that you guys do to work on neck strength, peripheral vision, and reaction time?
yeah. So in the clinic, we're utilizing a piece of machinery called the Synaptic, and it's this touchscreen board. I know you guys know this, but it's basically reaction speeds, hand-eye coordinations, perception training, spatial memory. These are essentially brain games, but they create a fun, playful environment. And it sounds kind of like kiddos, right? But that's what helps neuroplasticity. That's what helps these changes.
When you're in a state of play, then you can learn, then you can grow.
Exactly. Yep. I think even in neuroplasticity realm, the changes of doing repetitions that's the biggest thing in making these changes and these daily habits and things like that. Kind of play a role in it. But when you add play into it, you decrease the amount of repetitions hundredfold, and
You don't need to do it so
drastic.
many times.
No,
If
not
you
much.
Jumped in on this
Yeah.
one. I really thought the Synaptic was awesome because you use so much peripheral vision in martial arts.
Yeah.
You're supposed to typically stare at the center. You're not staring at one hand or you get hit with the other one.
Yeah.
So you're using your peripheral vision, and the better you are at seeing something coming from the outside and reacting to it. And with the Synaptic, you're catching little lights at the far end of your vision. You have to track that and see, and then make the decision on the spot. You have about half a second, 0.8 of a second, to make the right call based on the stimulus you're getting before it's gone, and you have to try it all over again. And it's so quick and reactive, and it feels very much like a light spar or something in that fact where you're really getting ready for that fast twitch reflex and using your eyes. A really underrated part of martial arts is the eyes.
Yeah, your eyes play such a big part in sports, and those athletes that really they train their brain, they train their vision and their sports cognition. If you can do that, you set yourself apart from the people that are just training in the gym or just training their physical bodies and not paying attention to the recovery or the brain aspects or the cellular health and then that kind of environment, and that can really give you a good edge. And in a 0.1, 0.2 of a second in a match can be the end of it for sure.
Right, and in the facility, trying to hit the lights on 0.8 compared to 0.6 is huge different. That 0.2 of a second is make or break, and personally my accuracy decreases and the amount of hits I get decreases, but it's trackable. You're in the gym, we were talking about powerlifting earlier,
Yeah.
You can measure your progress. We couldn't really track your eye speed very well in the past, but now with these more modern technologies and modalities, you can see the progress. You can see your scores go up, your accuracies go up, and it's really cool to see, and I can tell the difference in my vision and my reaction time, especially this peripheral far edge of the vision. Very cool to see.
The best and worst part of working with MMA fighters, the best part that you guys are super competitive, and probably the worst part that you guys are super competitive. It's always a question of, how are we performing? How are we doing, compared to last visit? It's always a push for more, and a lot of you guys and gals will almost get discouraged or hard on yourselves if you underperformed than what you did last time. And that's typical. Like
It's
that's
par for the course.
yeah, dude, it's not a linear progression. It's like the stock market. It's kind of
It's not
up and
just gonna
down,
go
and
up,
then
it's gonna go
you
down.
got a little downs in there, and it's okay. It's all part of the progress. But yeah, failure is definitely not an antecedent of success. It's part of that progress, and it's part of that
You
successful
kind
journey.
of see that fighters like heart and relentless, like I'm just gonna push hard
Yeah.
as the answer to recovery, which
Yeah.
sometimes has to be lighter days and things like that.
Yeah, that's and that kind of goes into the overtraining aspect of things. And if they're not trying to get 10%, 20%, 100% better that next day, they're discouraged. And there's a lot of that kind of mentality that goes into it. But
Which is another one we were curious on asking.
Can we
How
get
big
him
of
a
an
mic?
issue? How big of an issue do you think overtraining is? And what are some of the signs that someone is overtrained and they need to work more in recovery?
if you start feeling like not rested when you're waking up in the morning, and
Every morning? Okay.
yeah, like that. That's probably some signs, and it's not even so much of an overtraining as much as it is an under recovering, right? You have to treat the recovery aspect like it's a job, just as hard as you guys push in training. You're in the gym, you're sparring, you're rolling, you're doing these things. You're always pushing for the performance aspect. You have to give that time to recoup, regenerate, and rebuild, right? You have to rebuild before you try to push some more. So,
Right. I had a really good coach who would tell me two things. One, and they're along the same lines, but one, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And two, it's not about who's good, it's who's left. Especially in fighting where a lot of the sport it's a contact sport, it's about damaging the other person. Sometimes you're going to be the one getting damaged. If you don't do the recovery, you can never become a great fighter because it takes a lot of time. If you're going to do this for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years,
Doc, can I offer you a Zen?
yeah.
Personally, we roll with this one.
Okay, go for it.
All right.
Go for it.
So, one of the questions many of the youths will have here these days, as we've each shoved one of these into our mouths, is: Are Zyns healthy? In 10 years, are we going to learn that it's giving us all cancer?
Yeah,
What
what's
do you
the
think about
deal?
nicotine? What do you think about Zyns?
Yeah, so nicotine as a whole, I guess as a molecule, can be a lot of scientific literature that supports it being neuroprotective. With that being said, there are those harmful things, everything in moderation, right? And heavy doses and excessive
Abuse.
use. Yeah, abuse, it can become like hardening to your veins and decrease a lot of the systems and how they communicate with each other. But I guess Zyns on a side of things, probably one of the better forms for you.
If you're gonna take in nicotine,
Yeah, between that, chewing gum or like patches. There's a lot of guys at Harvard and Johns Hopkins that'll wear patches, periodically throughout the week just for those neuroprotective aspects, right? Daily basis probably not the greatest thing, but periodically there's proof and literature that supports decreased risk and chance of Parkinsonism, MS, neuroinflammatory diseases, and even dementia. So.
Wow. So potentially, could you explain why it might do that? Why would it be good for your brain? Is it stimulating neurons? Is it open new
Yeah.
neural pathways?
Actually, yeah. We have nicotinic receptors in our body, and it works in the autonomic nervous system, and it essentially sends a calming, relaxed yet focused, sense into the nervous system. So it helps a lot in that performance anxiety. It's a lot of the times even it's a self-medicated ADHD thing, or attention and concentration deficits, whether it's the true clinical label or not. But people tend to self-medicate with that in order to hyper-focus and utilize that way. But
I've heard THC in a similar vein. Just people saying there's a lot of health benefits. What do you think about THC? It's something very common here in Colorado and legal.
yeah, again, kind of working on a natural system and
Because
we
there are
have that.
cannabinoidal receptors in our
Yep.
brain. I'm saying that completely wrong, I'm sure, but similar to nicotine, we have something in our brain that processes well with that.
Yep, exactly. The endocannabinoid system, and it's able to modulate inflammation and blood flow regulation and things like that. Again, dosage is a huge thing, right? Abuse is a big thing. Like, there's a point where it is anxiolytic, where it can help curb that anxiety. Everybody's probably experienced that paranoia. There's that sense of a little too much, and
Right.
it can definitely be anxiogenic. And and hinder sleep and hinder these things that in smaller doses have been shown to be pretty effective for. But
And then I guess the other similar one, well, I guess we're on the holy trinity of small things you can put in the body to affect it. Nicotine, THC, and then psilocybin, something that's starting to become federally legal in certain places. It's a little bit unknown. What can you tell us on psilocybin, especially for maybe concussion recovery?
Ooh, I guess there's really not too much like literature on that, and I guess in the sense of the concussion recovery. Theoretically, and from just kind of looking at it, it seems promising. We do have patients that kind of self-report and anecdotally use the therapeutic recreational level. And what they report back seems to be pretty promising stuff as well. Just lightening mood, and again, if your subtype of concussion is landing into this emotional regulation and psychological nature of things, it can help modulate that and change neurochemical pathways and neuroplasticity avenues inside of the brain. But more literature and more research is needed for that.
You heard
for
it
sure.
here first, kids. Smoke a blunt with nicotine in
my
it, and then I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I
no,
was
it's
like, Robin, I'm freaking
So
out.
not,
I
so
gotta
not only
take
would
this
recommend
out.
nicotine, not recommended for pre-workout.
no, it makes your veins and your arteries constricted.
Vasoconstricting.
Yeah, vasoconstrictions. So less blood flow to the periphery, more to the gut and to the brain. Why it's so beneficial in like a working, computer jobs and things like that.
Sitting down
With
and
that.
thinking and talking,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not so much moving.
And with the the increase in that, and I guess tech as an industry through society, and more people working at home and desk jobs and things like that. On the other hand, cannabis can be used as a pre-workout and kind of a larger brain-body connection throughout your workout. You can be more in that flow state if that's your jam, it flows with you, it sits well with you, those kinds of things. So
I heard someone talk about THC with caffeine as being a way to hack flow. If you combine a small amount of caffeine, a small amount of THC to really put you in a flow state. Any thoughts on that? We haven't really talked about caffeine yet either.
It's again yes, it probably would. Looking at substances as a continuous way to get into a flow state probably isn't
Don't depend on
an
it.
unhealthy
Right.
thing.
Right.
Falling back on breath work, sleep hygiene, meditation, and that kind of recovery
I
zone.
just want to make sure when I go to the club, my moves
Yeah.
are very flowy.
Yeah.
and I think that put me in a good
It'll work.
place.
It'll work for sure. It'll get you going. After a few beers, you're out at the club and you smoke a cigarette, or you throw a Zen in or something.
Right, right.
And
If
go
that's
on
the goal.
more. Right,
Another
but-
one we had talked on that I really liked was, what are the basic supplements that you think everybody should be taking? What are those baseline supplements that everybody should be taking?
Everyone across the board, or fighters specifically?
We can go more on fighters and athletes for
Yeah.
the sake of the podcast,
Yeah.
but I'm curious what you think in general for health.
So I guess for fighters, athletes as a whole, surprisingly, creatine is actually super supportive to the cellular energy process and musculoskeletal as well as neurological improvements in performance. So that one undoubtedly. Vitamin D, magnesium, and probably say fish oils as a simple 4.
Omega-3s.
Yeah, omega-3s in heavy doses, 2 to 3 grams. So find one where it's a little easy to get down those pills, because when they come in 300s, it's tough choking down 10. But
Right.
those are the 4 supplements. Average people probably can add in activated B vitamins and things like that, but I definitely stay away from things like melatonin and some of these sleep aids and stuff like that, especially in a fight sport or any kind of athletic sport, utilizing that as a self-medication.
I heard
through-
recently melatonin was shown to affect or partially block puberty in teenagers. Have you heard of this?
I haven't actually, but I'm
That was
definitely
you
gonna read
actually
about that.
about it.
Okay.
I thought it was super interesting.
Yeah.
Stop taking it.
So
If you feel bloated on creatine, what's going wrong?
so you have a water electrolyte imbalance. You're not able to really master putting water into the cell, which is needed through things like potassium and sodium and other electrolytes. And if you're not properly hydrated, you're not properly have enough electrolytes in your system, then you're going to feel heavy, bloated, slow, and just not super great. You need to get those kidneys working and moving.
So creatine kind of holds more water?
It holds energy, so it combines with phosphorus in the cell, and it allows for your energy molecules to be burned continuously without it leaving the cell and using more energy. I guess in short, it's more space inside of the cell, so if you can actually load water into the cell and have it follow it, it can help it a lot.
Really? Interesting stuff. If there are supplements, you're like, hey, you're a fighter, these are the things, like your bare bones basics you should be taking every day. What are the supplements you suggest for fighters?
I got 4 right off the bat. Vitamin D, we got creatine monohydrate, magnesium, as well as fish oils. Those are your 4. You really want to be able to create proper fat inside of the brain through the fish oils and healing the nerves and the immune system and everything like that. You want creatine monohydrate for cellular energy and production within the cell. We also want vitamin D for proper testosterone production and muscle development and healing, as well as magnesium for cellular productions and enzymatic reactions. Yeah.
So beyond like those basic supplements fighters should take, what are any supplements that you recommend just for general health? Is there anything that you'd recommend if fighters want to go above and beyond? Maybe if they're at a stage where they have a little bit more money and they're starting to make it and they want to spend more on that. What are other supplements that you suggest?
I'd probably say something like a really good multivitamin that has extra stuff in it for brain health. Alpha lipoic acid, things like carnitine that help push fat into the cell, burn for energy. Getting onto a supplement for activated B vitamins, again, to kind of help cellular energy production and nervous system health. Outside of that, just good electrolytes, good water intakes, things like that.
And I think this is going more to like some of the basics we talked about. I forget how you worded it, but it was something like healthy like basics or building block basics. Like, what are those principles? Basic. We did the principles, but we were talking about this earlier. Like you're saying, okay, everybody needs to have this and this and this. What are some of those healthy basics you can talk about?
Yeah, so people, my wife and other people in the clinic always make fun of my little acronyms, but
they're great. They're specific. It helps you remember them.
I call them BLGs, basic lifestyle guidelines. These are what help you not have to see me the rest of your life, right? Think of these as brushing your teeth, right? If you relied on the dentist to brush your teeth.
Everybody, regardless if you're a fighter or not, everybody should be doing these.
Everybody
always.
Across the board. Athletes, weekend warriors.
Grandpas.
Yeah, people pushing performance for life. We want proper sleep hygiene, making sure that you're winding down and trying to, park your car at an appropriate speed, right? We don't try to get off the highway and slam into park at 60 miles an hour. Don't lay in bed like the same thing. Go for a walk at sunset, decompress, do some breath work, do some stretches and movements, then go to bed, right? Process your day and get in there, right?
So sleep hygiene.
Sleep hygiene, we want daily exercise in some capacity, whether that's walks or training, resistance training, mobility, aerobic training, some form of those, probably each one of those a few times a week. Try to spread them out, just an appropriate level of all of them. Active breath work is huge, so being able to find time throughout your day, whether it's immediate changes, you got 3 to 5 minutes, you got 10 minutes, sit down, do some breath work. Those are key access points into the flow state, into relaxation, managing anxiety and stress, all the way to recovery and performance. So nutrition is the last one. So what we put into our bodies is everything, and we got to make sure that it's whole foods and as organic and wholesome as possible. I tend to try to shop the perimeters of the stores, produce, meats, waters, things like that, and go down the aisles for the rice and the beans and the things like that, but try to stay away from everything else, the processed foods. If it comes in a package, no matter what it's labeled as, it probably isn't good for us.
Do you recommend, this is one we've recently gotten into, do you recommend everybody take some form of electrolytes every day? Is that necessary? Can you get it without a supplement?
Yeah, or at least salting your water. A couple glasses a day salted will do plenty. But really getting a nice, electrolyte packet, whether that I really like Ultima and Element. Those are two really good brands that have low sugar content, really good production of the electrolytes, and just the contents of those electrolytes. Trying to have one of those a day, or salt some water every now and then. Make sure you're salting your food. Industry's been so bad at telling you that salt's bad for you, so
Right.
it's not. This chronically,
Especially as an athlete.
no, definitely not. It's how we push water into the cells. Otherwise, they're just slicking right off. So.
Because I've always heard if you just drink water that has nothing in it, it's just going through you.
Yeah.
But if it has electrolytes in it, if it has something in it, that is what helps your energy. That's what helps you
Yep.
use that.
All right, Doc. So fighter had a long day of training, really spiked his adrenaline. He sparred, he's revved up. He needs to calm down. He needs to go to sleep. What would you recommend as far as a breathing exercise to help us relax, help us start to drift off into that REM sleep?
One of my most favorite ones is the box breath. Anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. What you're going to do is you're going to take a nice big inhale for a certain amount of time. You're going to hold it for that same amount of time. You'll exhale for that same amount of time, and then hold again. So you pick any number from 3 to 5 seconds. I try to start around 4 seconds, so then try to bring it out to like 7 or 8 if you can, and it doesn't create too much of a stress response in the beginning. But that really puts your nervous system in a nice calm state and builds and gets you into that sleep readiness.
All right, Doc, what about a breathing exercise before sparring, before training to rev you up or just get you ready for action?
For athletes.
Yeah, so I got 3 breath works, and one's immediate, and that's going to be your physiological sigh. So it's going to be 3 big inhales, a hold at the top, and a big sigh as an exhale. So, and then a large exhale as a sigh. If you repeat that a few times, that'll get you geared up, ready to go into whatever sparring event, even into a match, the ring. You got tens of thousands of people watching you, nerves are high, can help modulate that.
I can't tell you how many amateurs just hold their breath their entire first fight. I mean, me included.
Yeah.
I won the fight, but I mean, it really takes it out of you. I don't recommend it. Don't hold your breath all the time.
What's,
Get your breath working.
What's another one that you like?
So breathing as a whole, right? I mean, I just try to be as dynamic with your breath as possible. If you're in the gym and you're working out and you're sparring, do a round where you're focused on your breath through those movements, right? I have a funny thing, if you can breathe through a movement, you own that movement, right? So, not really squatting over 500 anymore, but when I do squat, it's when I'm in the depth, I try to breathe. I take 3 to 5 breaths and keep the core stability through that motion. And it's much more challenging and much more productive in that side of things. So the 3 different styles of breath work, we talked about physiological sigh and having that more as an immediate effect. If you got 3 to 5 minutes, do a box breath. I add in that Ujjayi exhale, which is essentially a hum or trying to fog up the glass pane with a closed mouth. So it kind of sounds like a on the way out. That's helping to activate calmness into the nervous system and kind of preparing and modulating any of those pre-fight anxieties or just getting the system ready or recovered from a heavy day or prepped up for a long day ahead of you. If you got 10 minutes, I suggest Wim Hof, what you were doing in the hyperbaric, right? That's a great place for it. You pull up a video on YouTube, they got tons of guided sessions, and go for that. That's going to really improve lung capacity, CO2 tolerance, blood pH, and again, kind of that chemical environment for your cells to proliferate and neuroplasticity to be enhanced. So, breathwork's huge, and that's one of our biggest tickets, BLG's basic lifestyle guidelines to tap into and utilize on a daily basis.
One of the things that you guys offer and suggest for fighters and athletes and everybody else at Axon for recovery and performance is brain training. What is brain training and why do they need to be doing it?
Yeah, so brain training is like taking your brain to the gym. We're going to find asymmetries, we're going to find weaknesses, and train those areas and make them stronger, make them more robust and more connected to the rest of the brain so that you're faster, you're smarter, you're quicker, you can make better decisions than that opponent that's maybe not doing that or taking it as seriously as you are. Right? We find areas that are weak and asymmetries potentially, and then we activate and upregulate those areas, and or downregulate areas that might be too active or screaming at the rest of the brain. So we essentially balance and take it to the gym and do reps and sets and reaction speed, neurocognition, sports vision. Yeah.
Everybody does their bicep curls, but
Able to train your brain, you have that upper advantage. If you can think better, you can move better, you can make those decisions faster, you don't need to be faster or stronger than that opponent, right?
better timing, better accuracy.
Everything plays a part in that, right? So if you can see, you guys posted a video.
Drew Dober, head off line.
Yeah, the head off line was huge, and that leads into being able to do ballet and cross-training exercises that stimulate vestibular impacts and ocular motor correlation with that vestibular system, and being able to shift and keep your eyes on target is a big aspect of brain control that is easily damaged and overlooked in concussions and repeated head injuries. So training that and being on an optimized side of it puts you on in a much more advantage, because you guys get punched in the face for a living. You're gonna have some level of neural inflammation going on almost at all times. So being able to manage that and then optimize your space in that gives you the upper hand in a fight, big time.
Wow.
Big time.
Tell us more about the idea of recovering being just as important, if not more, than training hard, and how you have to recover hard.
Yeah, it allows your body to recoup and rebuild, right? If you continue to deplete your system, you're really never at 100% output, right? Next day you're at 97, and then you're at 94, and then so on and so forth.
You do that for a few years.
Yeah, then your 100% is really 84% of your outputs, right? Which truly isn't. You have 16% to gain now, right? So if we can tap into that, that's a big potential improvement to sport performance. And
there's never a time more than you want to be at 100% than when you're about to fight for your life in a cage in your underwear.
Yeah.
You gotta be as close to as 100% as you can be, and we know so many fighters that go into fights injured and maybe even a little bit concussed, or like you said, some neuroinflammation. Not working that recovery can make you lose fights.
Yeah, and then you're left into a state where you're trying to look for some of these cheap and quick alternatives, performance-enhancing drugs, testosterone, things like this. They really don't do anything to help you improve performance. They're much more recovery tools, and they're doing the job that you're not putting the effort into, right? So you're having a substance do the work for you, which again creates negative relationships around that, and just you're off-putting the BLGs that are going to be doing the same thing without fucking with your body. So.
All right. So basically, instead of being like, "Hey, I'm a broken down beat up fighter who's trying to perform, so I feel like I need to take some steroids," instead of doing that, put the time into doing recovery, put the time into performance, put the time into being healthier, because that's all the steroids are going to do anyway, is help with recovery.
Exactly, and they're foreign substances. They lead into a whole lot of other things, right?
Health complications.
Right. Exactly. Again, we have these systems in our bodies not for the abuse and exploitation of them, whether it's cannabis or nicotine or testosterone. They're just, they're molecules. They should be treated with respect. They're heavy hitters, and looking at it like that as a cheap way out or a quick way out probably isn't it, right?
And doesn't move towards longevity.
No, these big guys, and even in bodybuilding, right? Dorian Yates, Arnold Schwarzenegger, they were in prime health, and then they added those things on top, right? And they were in a sport where it allowed it, and a time that kind of
it was less known, less understood.
Yeah, maybe even more glorified, right? Like that look, that definition, that physique was much more desirable. In fighting, or in other performance sports, I just don't see the benefit to it. In a long run thing, if we're trying to fight for decades on end, that's not how we do it, right?
And if you want to be a healthy person when you're done fighting, because eventually that career ends.
Yeah, and then you should be in a phase where you're enjoying and reaping the fruits of your labor, right? So not in a zone where you can't talk or can't walk, or you have tremors, or you have irritability and anger issues, right? Like that's not where we want to be when we're in a retired zone, right? We still want to be optimized and spend time with our family and friends and, do things that aren't fighting,
Right.
And I think as many times as we can do things that aren't our traditional sport and cross-train give us extra inputs. And I don't know, maybe even that, like, I don't know a lot of fighters that cross-train, right? Like,
Right, that do other sports or other
No.
other movements.
yeah, skiing, mountain biking, these are two really big inputs, trail running, that can be good brain games and cross-training that we have a lot of access to here in Colorado. So
I've heard that as a theory a little bit from one of the coaches for us, the hobby. He's a famous coach, but saying that if you're only ever doing the same sport, the same movements, it's really going to grind and beat up your body because you're always doing the same thing. But if you mix in some other things, you mix in some running, you mix in some swimming, maybe some volleyball, maybe some skiing, it's better for you as an athlete, it's better for your body.
yeah, I guess that can be applied to every aspect of life, right? And the foods we eat, and not only like what we prepare at home, but what we experience and how we travel and all those things. It should be a variety. It should be new and novel.
And it's neuroplasticity. You're doing something new. You're growing.
Exactly. And it keeps things fresh and novel and new to the brain. So it's always in that playful state. It's always in the learning phase. It's always staying young, right? And then that's how we stay young forever. So you're always learning and you're always being a kid.
I had a conversation with a UFC veteran, John Fitch, where he had discussed, people always ask fighters, like, aren't you worried about your brain? He's like, well, I'm always doing something with it, reading books, playing music, learning a new instrument, learning something new. So I'm not too worried about it because, to his mind, he's like, your brain is a muscle and I'm always flexing it.
Yep.
Can you talk on that? Is that something that you see with people that as long as they're continuing to learn and grow, that's definitely going to be good for their brain, especially as a fighter?
Yeah, absolutely. The more things that we can bring into our lives, the more new things that stimulate that want, that desire for more, can lead into and proliferate other aspects in our lives that we haven't been, or that have been more in a traditional sense, right? I love that you brought up music because that's a huge aspect, and that could be very beneficial in a therapeutic setting for a lot of guys and gals, right? And just not only in recovery but also performance. Sound waves, frequency medicine is an old school thought, but it's showing a lot more merit now. And that can have big implications into emotional regulations and moods that you're going into, right? So as well as healing yourself. So yeah, music's a big one to jump into.
So I should continue to sing in the shower.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, let everybody hear it.
Let's go.
Yeah.
So I had asked a really important question to Dr. Brad before in one of our previous conversations, which is this. Can you do this sport? Can you do MMA? Can you do contact sports? Can you do combat sports for many years and still come out of it and be able to be healthy? Can you come out of it without lasting permanent damage? Because this is one that has weighed on us. We've been in this sport. We coach people. The last thing I ever want to see is a fighter get that lasting damage after their career that really affects them for their life. Can you do combat sports and still be healthy?
I think so. Right? Again, kind of comes down to the cellular health, metabolism, and being able to put your body in an environment for health and longevity. And if we can, again, utilize these tactics to stay young, and supplementation and nutrition as a whole, right? Some of these things, CTE, Alzheimer's, Parkinsonism.
The big scary concerns for fighters.
Exactly, everything that's brain related, that's it's tough to deal with, and what you're most afraid of can be prevented usually through nutrition the most, sleep as well. So what we put into our bodies is huge, and that sugar regulation is really what we're seeing as the driver for Parkinson's, and that vagus nerve and gut brain access in the brain directly for Alzheimer's and things like that. So if we can put our bodies in proper cellular metabolism and environments, I think that the sustainability and longevity is completely doable. You just have to, that should be part of your journey, right?
And then taking it very seriously, if you do feel like I am concussed, going, getting checked, doing the proper things to recover before you return to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And having the mindset that you'll recover and be 100% again, right? We had one of the fighters come in and he's dealing with knee pain, and he made a comment, and right after it was you know, he's feeling so much better. He's like, I got still a little bit of a sharp pain, but that'll always be there. And just that mindset, like, that'll always be there.
It's an old school
Yeah,
mentality
like
that
it's
we can move past.
Yeah, we can move past, right? If you put in the effort, it doesn't have to be that way, right? The body isn't a machine. We don't need WD-40. We create our own, right? These things like arthritis, even, they get labeled as a wear and tear, are really a wear and lack of repair, right? Things like magnesium, fish oils, vitamin D, whether that's through a diet or extra supplementation, is really where we get our building blocks for, you know, rebuilding and repairing these joints that we put a lot of stress and pressure through. The body's extremely resilient. It can handle all kinds of things that you throw at it, and it wants to be healthy. It wants to be in that phase. So if you give it the fuel system, right? We always want to push the motor and push what we think is that's the only part of the car.
Go, go, go.
Yeah, the fuel system's just as important. Having air in the tires is just as important. The chassis, the drivetrain, the oil, all of these things are, if not more important than the engine themselves, right? And the performance or horsepower that you're trying to push. So even switching that mindset and that framework of being long, right? I want to still spar and roll when I'm 80. That's the mindset you want
Right.
to be in, right?
Right.
I love skiing. That's my sport now. I want to ski and hike mountains and ski down them when I'm 90.
Right.
And that's how I've built my training modules now. Instead of trying to hit 600 pounds on the squat, I train for life and
Right.
trying to train for that longevity in the sport that I love. And I think that you should make that mindset switch. You know, yes, we want titles and big careers and all of that. It will come, right? And
It doesn't have to be two separate things.
no, and that'll come with like the daily practices and the dedication that you put into your sport, and focusing on that as the outcome will almost it'll negate the process, and the process is where the beauty comes into place. Rick Rubin talks about this. If you guys are familiar with him, he's in music, and he essentially sits in the recording room and says what songs are going to be hits or what should be on the album or not. He can't play an instrument. He doesn't sing. He's not a producer. He
Kind of
just,
a Simon Cowell.
yeah, he just sits
figure.
and he has that ear, that knack, right? And he really talks about the dedication and the effort in the process and not the outcome, right? And the process will reap our rewards and everything we're working for, right? If you're focused on the process, those things are then fun, and you know they come and you process them and you keep going, right? When it's the end goal, you can feel lost. You've succeeded or you haven't succeeded, and that's a mindset and framework that we should try to get away
For
of.
fighters and athletes, maybe less of being like the goal, I have to be champion or I have to win, more so focus on the process of, well, if I want to do that, I need to be healthy, I need to recover, I
Yep.
need to make sure
Yep.
if I do get concussed,
Yeah.
I go in, I get myself back to 100%,
Yep.
then I get back at it.
And that goes back to SMART goals, right? I mean, in high school, middle school, you're making these goals like, you know, I want to lose 20 pounds or I want to be a millionaire, right?
Right.
How are you going to do that? Like, it's great if you have a goal, but what's the plan on getting there?
Right.
What are you going to do differently on a day-to-day basis to get you towards that goal? You got to be uncomfortable, right? You got to put yourself in these situations where it's change, right? And it's difficult, it's frustrating, it's challenging. We don't want to do it, but that's what gets us better. That's what's healthy for the brain. That's why learning new things is so good, right? And it's how we stay young. It's how we hold a career through fighting and combat sports and any other sports that are high impact, high risk. So being able to do that and longevity is a reachable and obtainable goal for sure.
Very cool. We've been in the sport now we started 15, we're 26 now, 11 years in. You know, coming up in the sport at 15, 16, we were sparring adults. There wasn't as many protocols in place as there are now, and even nowadays in most gyms there's not like this go-to protocol where if you get rocked really bad, if you get knocked out, God forbid, in training, most of the time there's not like, well, do this, do that, go see this guy, take this, don't spar for a couple months. There's very, very, very little as far as guidelines and regulation. So this really excites me as an opportunity to inform the next generation, and give them access to information and potentially somewhere to go if something, God forbid, happens, which is just kind of shitty. Maybe you get concussed and your vision sucks and you have a headache for a week and it's not going away by itself. Just speak a little bit on that if you can.
Yeah, so providing these protocols and things like that that are easy to obtain and little to no cost at all, require a lot more of the at-home stuff, but are highly effective, can help modulate and change some of these symptoms and the root causes and the problems that are driving them.
All right, Doc, I just want to ask you about the 60-40 theory when it comes to concussions, the 60-40 rule, if you will.
Yeah, so where 60% of individuals are going to heal from this concussion in that 2-week time, 40% end up not, right? And even if you are feeling better and your symptoms are recovered in those 2 weeks, the neurometabolic cascade of events that happens after a concussion can last up to 21 days. Just knowing and seeing a provider, a specialist as soon as possible, and initiating a return to play protocol is super important in the beginning. And initially getting popped, getting your bell rung or something like that, do some breath work and make sure that our diet is super clean for these weeks. When you have a brain injury, you have an expanse of the blood-brain barrier, you have a gut injury as well. You have an expanse of that gut lining. There's a lot of inflammatory mechanisms that lead, for opportunistic times in that time, and then you just being able to support the gut in that system is super easy to obtain and something you can do right away without, having to see me putting yourself at the best chances and odds to recover and heal in those 2 weeks, 21 days. If not, we need to check out how your neck's moving, how your eyes are moving, and energy systems and behavior and things like that, and get a plan set in place so that we can return you to play as soon as possible and as healthy and effectively as possible as well.
Sweet.
Very nice.
All right, Doc, I wanted to ask you about the 7 steps to return to play if you do indeed suffer from a concussion.
Yeah, so immediately, first day after that concussion, we want to stay moving. We need to go for a walk, do some breath work, try to read a book, stay off our phones, eat really healthy. If we can go through a day like that and not have any increases of symptoms, we can move on to the next day, right? The next stage of care, right? So then that's light aerobics and getting into light jogs and, again, more breath work and diet and things like that. That day feels good, you move to day 3, heavier running, more moderate aerobic activities, light resistance training, getting back into the gym. Again, kind of pushing core support, breath work through movements. If we're feeling good from that, we can move on to the next one. You got sport-specific movements and training and being able to, hit a bag, right? And not really sparring, no holding pads, no nothing like that, but being able to move through the paces, right? Again, getting into heavier workouts, things like that, pushing yourself into higher heart rates. Again, no symptoms, no increases, move to the next. Then we get into return to play, no contact. We can roll, we can spar, gently, no head hits, anything like that. Then we can move into return to play sparring, but with monitoring, right? Making sure you're feeling good, getting heart rate up to max, pushing yourself. Again, you're feeling good, you're cleared.
And those
so
7 days would be the shortest possible. It may
Yep.
take a few days in between those.
Yep.
That could be around 21 days, something like that.
Yep, at the very least, those 7 days, right?
Potentially 2 steps forward, 1 step back. If you're feeling
Yep.
a little bit of symptoms on one of those steps, maybe take another day and then try to continue again.
Yep, take a break right immediately, whatever you're doing, that's where we call it, don't push it, right? And like a brain injury is not like a knee injury where we can push past pain. If you start feeling that twinge, you start feeling that spike up, just tone it down just a little bit and, balance out for the day. Focus more on the recovery aspects of things, the breath works, the walks, the diet, nutrition, electrolytes, water, things like that.
So we were on a trip recently to Denmark, and we all got on the plane, and when we got off, Ryan had this big shit-eating grin on his face, and I was like, what's going on? And he's like, I just realized I could take on anyone in this plane. So, as a
I remember
doctor,
that.
do you ever find yourself going like, oh man, if shit goes down, I'm the only one that's gonna have to save everyone?
Yeah, a couple times, and like being a chiropractor, kind of obviously I'm not an ego thing, but like I do practice very differently than most chiropractors. It it gets into that, like, where is there a doctor on board or anything like that, and like like if nobody's answering, I gotta go, right?
Yeah.
And like the sports medicine, the triage, and the emergency medicine that I know is more than sufficient. I mean, we're basic life
For basics.
savings and things like that. So like, yeah, those emergency procedures are definitely good to know. And yeah, I try not to travel intoxicated too much for that reason. And just, yeah, keeping that, being a, I don't know, again, wolf among the sheep, right? You can take
Right.
people, right, if somebody's,
You can
you know,
break
you
them,
see
you can fix them.
justice is not being served,
Right.
right, or something's happening, you know,
Right.
grandma's getting her purse stolen, you have, you know, the procedures to handle that aspect, right, and be kind of like, you know, the wolf among the sheep.
Well, Dr. Brad, thank you so much for coming on. Please tell the people where they can find you. Plug your stuff for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast, guys. I enjoyed being here and helping the Savage Gentleman community. And yeah, you can find us on the internet and AxonIntegrativeHealth.com. You can give us a call at 720-994-2966. We can get you started to get you going. This isn't just for you guys and gals as athletes or fighters. If your kiddo is dealing with issues, or your grandmother, brother has a knee problem, or wife or mom has headaches, migraines, we can help. So just taking that integrative approach and really trying to change the paradigm of healthcare and being that next step and that opportunity for people that have been struggling with healthcare conditions or performance and wanting to get better. So we're here for you, and yeah, we take a different approach.